She didn't even open the door. And for that, they nearly arrested her dog Deborah Cunningham. The HOA president, with a stare sharp enough to cut glass, stood on our lawn screaming into her phone. Her voice cracked the quiet of our peaceful street. "She's a criminal, I know it," she shrieked into 911, like she'd just witnessed a drug cartel forming in our garden bed. The reason my wife Sarah didn't answer the door, she was inside, not hiding, just working. And that drove Deborah insane. 20 straight minutes of pounding had twisted her into something feral. I watched from our kitchen window as the police car pulled up and Deborah pointed like a deranged traffic cone. Rest her, now. But when Sarah finally stepped outside, calm and silent, the officers didn't move. Something about her presence made them freeze, eyes wide, posture stiff. And when she pulled out what she had in her hand, Deborah's triumphant grin turned to horror. 2 weeks earlier, none of this had existed. No drama, no sirens, just boxes and fresh coffee in what we thought was our dream neighborhood. Sarah had just received a major promotion, though she'd been oddly quiet about the details. "Honey, just tell people I work in finance for now," she'd said while unpacking dishes. "I'll explain later." I didn't question it. Sarah was always smart, intuitive in a way that felt years ahead of everyone else. She saw angles I didn't even know existed. If she needed quiet, I'd give her quiet. But the storm came fast. The first gust, Deborah. She appeared the first weekend, standing on the sidewalk like she was waiting for an opening scene. Arms crossed, expression locked in judgment. She didn't wave, just stared. Then, with the force of a parade commander, she marched toward me and shoved a thick binder into my hands. "I'm Deborah Cunningham, president of the Homeowners Association," she barked. "Read this, every page." The binder weighed as much as my dog. I skimmed it. Rules on grass height, door pane shades, garbage can angles, literal degrees. "Whoa," I said, trying not to sound sarcastic. "Comprehensive." Her eyes narrowed. "We take our standards seriously." Just then, little Tommy from next door zipped past on his bike and chirped, "Hi, mister." But when he saw Deborah, his smile melted. "Why are you always so angry, Mrs. Deborah?" I liked Tommy immediately. Then Sarah stepped outside, jeans, t-shirt, hair tied back, nothing dramatic. But the air changed. Deborah's expression twisted into something sharp. She didn't greet her, just asked coldly, "And you are Sarah, Michael's wife. What do you do for work?" The words were loaded, like an interrogation dressed as small talk. Sarah didn't blink. "Finance, pretty boring stuff." Deborah didn't believe her. You could feel it. That strange, simmering suspicion. Tommy scraped his knee moments later, and Sarah helped him up like a gentle protector. But Deborah only watched her like she was recording everything in her mind. Later that night, we sat on the porch, and I muttered, "That woman gives me the creeps." Sarah just sipped her tea. People like that always hang themselves. You just have to give them enough rope. And we did. Every day after, Deborah escalated. First, it was emails. Our trash can was an inch too far from the curb. Our tree was 2.5 millimeters over height. She'd copied the entire board on every message. She wanted us cornered. I wanted to retaliate. But Sarah stayed calm. Let her waste her time. We're not breaking any rules. Deborah's daily patrols started 3 times a day. She'd slow walk past our house, squinting at every flower petal like it was a federal crime. Neighbors warned us. She made us repaint our fence 3 times. One whispered at the mailbox. And poor Mrs. Chen had to rehome her dog because Deborah documented every bark. And then someone told me Deborah's son had been arrested the year before. She's got it out for anyone who looks like authority. The man said, "She's paranoid. Always has been." I wish I'd taken it more seriously, because a few days later, while I was at work, the pounding started. Sarah had been on an important video call. She couldn't answer. Deborah pounded, rang, peered through windows. She finally shouted, loud enough for every neighbor to hear, "I know you're in there." I'll show you who runs this neighborhood." That night, Sarah was quiet. "She's escalating," she whispered. "People like her don't stop. They just wait for an audience." And Deborah found hers. The next afternoon, as I returned home, I saw her standing in her yard, phone in hand, eyes well. Jake, my coworker, pulled up next to me and frowned. "Is she live streaming?" I groaned. "That's our HOA president." We entered the house. Sarah's car was in the garage. She was probably on another call. But through the window, I saw Deborah on her phone. Not streaming now. She was calling someone. "Hello, 911. There's a suspicious woman at 3427 Maple Street. Refuses to interact with neighbors. Looks like someone from a wanted poster. Could be hiding something." My sandwich fell from my hand. She was calling the cops on Sarah. It wasn't even subtle. She was inventing crimes. She sneaks packages inside, has strange men visit, pizza delivery, Amazon, everyday life, twisted into evidence. 20 minutes later, red and blue lights lit up our street. My chest felt like it was collapsing. Officer Martinez stepped out, young, a little nervous. Deborah ran toward him like she was auditioning for a crime show. "That woman is dangerous," she shouted, pointing at our home. He tried to stay professional. "Ma'am, what exactly is the emergency?" "She won't answer the door. She's clearly hiding something. Search the house." "Ma'am, that's not a crime." But Deborah wouldn't stop. "I'm the HOA president. I know this neighborhood. She's trouble." I was about to open the front door when Sarah beat me to it. She stepped out from the garage, calm, collected. Eyes steady, jeans and a blouse. Nothing special. But the entire street went quiet. "Good afternoon, officer," she said. Officer Martinez relaxed slightly. "We had a call about suspicious activity. Just wanted to ask a few questions." "She's got something," Deborah screeched. "She's armed." Martinez's hand reached for his holster. But then Sarah held up her hand, palm open. "Not a weapon, a badge, and not just any badge." Martinez froze. His mouth fell open. Chief Johnson." The silence was louder than the sirens. And for the first time in her life, Deborah Cunningham had nothing to say. He called her chief, and the moment the word left his mouth, I felt the entire street tilt sideways. "Chief Johnson?" "I didn't know," Officer Martinez stammered, straightening so fast I thought he might throw out his back. His hand shot up in a shaky salute, nearly smacking himself in the forehead. "Ma'am, I apologize. I didn't realize this was your..." Sarah lifted a hand and spoke in a tone so calm and measured. It silenced him mid-sentence. "At ease, Officer Martinez. You're doing your job. I appreciate your diligence." The weight of that badge glittered in the sunlight between them, not just metal and enamel, but a 40 incarnate. From where I stood, just behind the screen door, I finally saw the words on the badge. "Chief of Police," and not from a different county, not even from another district. Our city. Sarah, the woman I had shared 7 years, 1 mortgage, a dozen burnt pancakes, and a secret Friday karaoke ritual with, was the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the region. My wife, the finance analyst, spreadsheet queen, "Don't worry about it, champion," was the chief. How the hell had I missed this? And then I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. That slow, sputtering deflation, like air leaking from an overinflated balloon. It came from Deborah. "No," she whispered, clutching her phone like it was a crucifix. "No, that's not possible. You're lying. You're not. That's fake." Martinez wasn't even listening. His full attention was on Sarah, now visibly rattled that he hadn't recognized his own superior. "I didn't see the memo. It hasn't gone public yet. I mean, I just started last month." Sarah turned just enough for me to glimpse her face in profile. I'd never seen her like that before. Not just calm, but powerful, still. "Precise, deliberate. You're doing fine, officer. Let's just walk through what happened." And then she turned her eyes on Deborah. No movement, no words, just that look. That unblinking stare you give someone when you already know the ending and you're just waiting for them to catch up. Deborah faltered. I have evidence, she suddenly barked. This doesn't change anything. You think you've won. But I've got something. I have proof that you're not fit to wear that badge. Sarah didn't even flinch. Then show it, she said, simply. Deborah blinked. What? Show everyone, Sarah repeated, louder now, voice steady as granite. If you have something, show it. Deborah's eyes darted from Sarah to Martinez to the growing crowd of neighbors now emerging from houses, mailboxes, behind bushes, an audience drawn by sirens and drama. Phones were out. Cameras were rolling. Even Tommy, still sticky from a popsicle, was recording with his mom's phone like a miniature war correspondent. Deborah clutched her device tighter. I'll show the proper authorities. Not this is HOA business. Not this isn't the place. Sarah stepped forward. It is now. I watched Deborah's confidence drain like wine from a shattered glass. Her phone hand shook. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her eyes were wild, searching for a lifeline. She didn't find one. I need to consult my lawyer, she mumbled at last. That was the final card, and it was blank. Sarah looked at Officer Martinez. I want everything documented. The false emergency call, the harassment, the slander. And note that Ms. Cunningham is the acting president of the HOA and has weaponized her position to target us since the day we moved in. Martinez nodded, fumbling with his notepad. Yes, ma'am. Someone clapped. It started slow, hesitant, then another, then half a dozen, and then it erupted applause from porches, sidewalks, balconies, whistles, cheers. And in the center of it, Deborah shrank. Wait, she cried suddenly, voice cracking. You think this is over? I'll take this to the mayor, the council. I have connections. The mayor plays golf with my cousin. Sarah tilted her head slightly. Tell him I said hi. We had dinner last week. Deborah's face contorted into something beyond description, rage wrapped in humiliation and smothered in fear. Martinez looked hesitant again. Should I place her under arrest for the false emergency call? Sarah studied Deborah for a long beat, then gave a single nod. Take her to the station. Get her statement. She can answer for her behavior under penalty of law. Martinez stepped forward, gentle but firm. Ms. Cunningham, I need you to come with me. I'm not under arrest. Not yet, he said, trying to keep his tone neutral. But we do need to document this thoroughly. I know my rights. Then you know refusing a lawful directive will escalate this. Martinez offered a hand. She slapped it away. But when he reached for his radio, her face went white. She didn't resist after that. Neighbors watched in stunned silence as she was escorted to the cruiser, not cuffed, but clearly not driving herself. The car pulled away. And just like that, Deborah Cunningham disappeared. The crowd began to disperse slowly, buzzing with the thrill of what they'd just witnessed. Some came over to apologize. Others introduced themselves for the first time. I'm sorry we didn't warn you, one man said. We were all just hoping she'd calm down after the new year. Tommy, still vibrating with excitement, ran up with two of his friends. I knew you were a cop, he exclaimed at Sarah. Pay up. He added, turning to the others. You had secret agent. I had lawyer. Police chief wasn't even an option. The third kid grumbled. Hey, Mrs. Sarah, can I ask something? Can you do a backflip? Sarah grinned for the first time all afternoon. That's more for action movies. Buddy, I stick to paperwork and stopping people from abusing the 911 system. That night, after the sunset and the neighbors returned to their homes, Sarah and I sat on our porch in the quiet. She held my hand, and I asked the question that had been building since the moment Martinez saluted. Why didn't you tell me? She exhaled slowly. It wasn't public yet. The appointment was classified for now pending formal announcement next week, and I didn't want to bring the badge into our home life. I wanted us to just be us for a little while longer. I didn't know what to say, so she kept going. There's more. The city recruited me for this. They knew my record. They knew what I'd handled in the past. But part of why it was confidential was because of a case I worked years ago. She paused. My heart thudded. The Johnson case? I asked quietly. Her eyes flicked toward mine. You heard that? I nodded. I don't know what Deborah thinks she's found. But that case, it wasn't clean. We did the job. I followed the law. But the man we arrested, Thomas Mitchell, he got hurt. Claimed excessive force. The department cleared me. So did the state. But the optics, she trailed off. What was he doing? I asked. Sarah looked at me for a long time. Then she answered. He was cooking meth. In a house with 3 kids inside. We didn't have time for subtlety. When we breached, he blew the lab trying to destroy evidence. I pulled those kids out of a fire. Mike, one of them, wrote me a letter last Christmas. But she stopped. It doesn't matter if it's true. People like Deborah only need an angle. If she twists it, if she makes it viral, then what happened won't matter. I sat with that for a moment. Then I asked the other question I didn't want to ask. Do we need to move? Sarah's jaw set. No, she came at me with lies. I'll respond with truth. Let her try to win in the court of public opinion. I'll win in the one that matters. And just like that, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. Deborah hadn't been arrested. She'd been embarrassed, outplayed, momentarily defeated. But she wasn't done. And Sarah, my wife, the police chief, was already preparing for whatever came next. The silence didn't last. 3 days after Deborah was escorted off our street, our mailbox was flooded. Not just flyers or junk mail. 30-7 anonymous complaint letters, all addressed to the residence of Chief Johnson, none signed, all stamped with the HOA logo. But something told me these didn't go through any official channel. Sarah read the first 2 and sighed. The third one made her eyebrows lift. She BCC'd the mayor. She muttered, showing me the header, accusing me of intimidating a civilian. The paper trembled slightly in her hand. Are you okay? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and opened a secure app, one I'd never seen her use before. She tapped in a long code, then brought up a folder marked incident, Maple conflict, dozens of voice memos, scans, and timestamps pour across the screen like water breaking through a dam. She recorded everything. She whispered. And then looked up at me. I recorded everything. That's when I realized how prepared Sarah really was. She hadn't just stood her ground the afternoon. She'd built a digital vault of every encounter, every insult, every violation Deborah had thrown at us since we moved in. And the fact that she needed to, that terrified me. By the end of that week, Sarah was pulled into an emergency ethics committee meeting at City Hall. It wasn't publicized, not officially, but within 12 hours. A local blog had already spun the headline, Police Chief, accused of intimidation after HOA scuffle. Sources say power was abused. The source, anonymous, but the wording matched one of the complaint letters, word dash for dash word. We both knew who wrote it. Deborah was back, just not in person. She was trying to destroy Sarah's credibility the only way left to her, from the shadows. By the following Monday, our home security camera picked up something strange. At 3:02 a.m., a shadowy figure approached our porch, not close enough to trigger the floodlight, but just close enough to place something under the doormat. A manila envelope. No fingerprints, no name. Just a printed label that read, "What she didn't tell you." Sarah found it before I did. She sat on the edge of our bed for a long time, flipping through the pages in silence. What is it? I finally asked. She held up a single photo. Old, grainy, a hospital room, a man on a gurney. His face burned, his eyes barely open. He was the meth lab suspect. She said softly, Thomas Mitchell. This photo was taken minutes after the explosion. It's real. But it doesn't tell the story. She showed me the next image. A child's shoe, melted at the toe, blood on the laces. They never include that one, she said. I sat beside her. Why is this happening? Sarah didn't move. Because people like Deborah can't stand being powerless. And when they feel small, They'll burn down everything around them to feel tall again. And then she did something I'd never seen her do. She cried, not sobbing, not loud. Just one hand over her mouth and tears falling silently into her palm. That's when I knew this wasn't just about Deborah anymore. Thought it was about the past Sarah had locked away. The parts she didn't let anyone, not even me, fully see. The next morning, we received a subpoena. Someone had filed a formal motion with the HOA board, demanding Sarah be removed from the community for dangerous conduct. Attached to the complaint, screenshots from the blog, blurred audio clips from a security camera, and a heavily edited video showing Sarah holding her badge, with all the sound stripped out except one echoing Lynn. E from Deborah screaming, "She's armed." The image froze on Sarah's calm face. It looked cold. Detached. Manufactured. The hearing was scheduled for Friday night at the local community center, open to the public, full of residents who didn't know which version of the truth to believe. The HOA board tried to act neutral, but Deborah's fingerprints were everywhere. She wasn't gone. She had just changed tactics. Now she was the puppet master, and Sarah was in the crosshairs. I offered to speak at the hearing. Sarah shook her head. I need to do this alone. But I couldn't sit still. So I made my own move. That Thursday, I went door to door. I brought printouts, audio, photos. Even Tommy's mom helped me distribute Sarah's actual community service record, the fundraiser she'd volunteered for, the officer she'd trained, the abuse report she filed against Deborah 2 weeks before the live stream. We weren't going to beg for sympathy. We were going to bring truth. Friday came. The room was packed. People filled every chair, stood against walls, lined the exit doors. News crews lingered outside. Local camera crews buzzed around like mosquitoes. And then Sarah walked in. No uniform. No badge. Just her, jeans, blazer, hair in a low bun. She looked like every working woman in the country, tired, sharp, dignified. The board chair cleared her throat. Chief Johnson, the board has reviewed the complaint. You've been accused of brandishing a weapon, intimidating a civilian, and compromising the sanctity of this neighborhood. Someone gasped. Another murmured. But Sarah didn't blink. She walked to the center of the room, pulled a small clicker from her pocket, and turned on the screen behind her. Click. A security cam still image. Deborah measuring our trash bin angle with a ruler. Click. A video. Deborah yelling at Sarah through the window while Sarah ignored her, calmly on a Zoom call. Click. Another video. The one from the day it all went down. But this one wasn't edited. The sound was clean. The badge wasn't held up like a weapon. It was presented calmly, professionally. And Deborah's screams, they weren't about danger. They were about dominance. The room went quiet, and then Sarah spoke. Neighborhoods are supposed to protect people, not control them. I chose to move here because I believed this community represented something better. I didn't come as a police chief. I came as a woman, a wife, and a citizen. She paused. But Deborah Cunningham tried to turn that into a crime. She weaponized fear. She lied. She filed false reports. And she used this HOA as her personal tool of vengeance. More murmurs. Sarah looked directly at the board. I've protected this city for 19 years. I've put men behind bars who harmed children. I've stood between guns and innocent people. If that makes me too dangerous to live on Maple Street, then say so. But if it doesn't, then maybe it's time you'll ask who really endangered this neighborhood. The room stayed frozen until a slow clap started near the back. It grew louder, stronger. And then the chair of the board leaned into her mic. We find the complaint against Chief Johnson to be baseless, dismissed. A man from the crowd shouted, vote to remove Deborah. Another yelled, audit the whole board. But Sarah simply turned, nodded once, and walked out into the night without saying another word. She didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for her. The silence after the vote should have felt like victory. But a DID in single quotes not to Sarah, not to me. The complaint had been dismissed. The crowd had cheered. Deborah's name was being whispered like a curse in every corner of the neighborhood. But as we pulled into our driveway that night, I glanced at Sarah and saw no joy in her eyes. She looked exhausted, not just tired, drained. Like something had been scooped out of her and replaced with cold air. "You okay?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned and stared at the side mirror, her eyes tracking the neighbor's driveway across the street. "Deborah's car is still gone," she said quietly. "That's 5 days now. She's probably hiding. You crushed her at the hearing." Sarah looked down at her hands. "She's not hiding." "What do you mean? She's waiting." That's when I realized Sarah wasn't celebrating because she knew something. ID in single quotes T. She knew this wasn't the final blow. It was just the opening act. The next morning, I woke to the sound of static. A low, fuzzy hiss that grew sharper with every step I took toward the living room. Sarah was sitting on the couch, remote in one hand, her eyes locked on the TV. "Channel 6, she whispered. I looked up. The news anchor was already mid-sentence. "An internal affairs inquiry has been opened after several anonymous tips accused Chief Sarah Johnson of concealing prior misconduct from her time in narcotics." My blood froze. A picture flashed across the screen. That same hospital photo, the one from the envelope. And next to it, Sarah's badge number. "They've gone public," she muttered. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She didn't even look at me. "Deborah, or someone working with her," the news anchor continued, "allegedly linked to a 2016 incident involving a botched raid. According to sources, a suspect sustained life-threatening injuries, and a formal investigation was opened. While cleared by the department, critics say the matter was buried and never brought before the public." Sarah turned off the TV. For a moment, there was only silence. Then she whispered, "It's Mitchell's brother. He's the one who took that photo. He's been holding onto this for years." My stomach churned. Why now? Because someone paid him too, or promised him something in return. Deborah's not smart enough to pull this off by herself, but give her a little resentment to weaponize. And this is what happens. That afternoon, the calls began. First, it was the mayor's office. Then city council. Then the precinct union. No one was panicking. Not yet. But the questions had changed. The tone had shifted. The whispers had started. Sarah went into work the next day wearing armor. Not literal, but close enough. Black suit, hair tight, expression locked in stone. She didn't even look at me when she left. Just said, "Don't answer the door for anyone. And keep your phone close." I did what she asked. But that night, I noticed something odd. Our internet slowed down, then completely cut off. I checked the modem. Nothing wrong. Router. Fine. Called the provider. "There's a service issue in your area," the voice on the line told me. "Interference. We've dispatched a crew." But no one came. Then, Sarah's phone glitched. Text messages delayed. Emails bouncing. Then my phone buzzed. An anonymous number. I let it ring. Voicemail. When I checked it, I heard only static, and one line whispered through it, "She doesn't belong here." The next morning, someone egged our front window. 3 cracked shells dripping down the glass like yellow tears. Sarah didn't even flinch. She grabbed her phone, snapped pictures, logged the incident, and filed it under a new folder. Retaliation. Phase 2. That's when it hit me. This wasn't new to her. This was what she did, what she'd always done. Fought wars no one else saw. Battles not with fists or guns, but with silence, proof, and patience. Still, it was wearing on her. I saw it in the way she stood now, slightly hunched at the shoulders, like the weight of every threat and whisper was pulling her spine forward. "Talk to me," I said one night as we sat in bed, the room dark except for the hum of her phone. "There's nothing to say." "Yes, there is." She didn't look up, but her voice softened. "I've been through worse." "That's not the same thing as being okay." A long silence. Then finally, "I didn't want you involved." I laughed bitterly. "I live here. I married you. I'm already involved. I mean this part. She said, the ugly part. The part where people come for your character, where they lie, twist, break you in public until no one knows which version of you to believe anymore. You think I care what they say? I think you don't know how deep it can go. Her voice cracked slightly. I've seen officers lose everything over a lie told at the right time by the wrong person. That's when I saw it. Not fear. Guilt. She wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for me. I won't lose you, she whispered. Not for this. Not again. Again. She looked away. That's when the next knock came. Not pounding. Not furious. Just a slow, steady knock. I opened the door and found a delivery box. No return address. Inside, a USB drive. And a note. You think she's innocent? Listen to this. We plugged it into the laptop. It was a recording. A private one. A wiretap. A voice. Barely audible. Then Sarah's voice. Clear. Make the call. If Mitchell resists, take the shot. I turned to Sarah. Her face was pale. That was spliced. She whispered. I never said that. You're sure? She looked at me sharply. You think I gave a shoot order during a civilian raid? I don't. I said, but the meteor might. And that's when the doorbell rang again. Sarah stood. This time, she didn't hesitate. She opened the door herself. Two men in suits stood on the porch. Not HOA. Not city officials. Internal affairs. They handed her a letter, effective immediately, administrative leave, pending investigation. And just like that, Deborah got what she wanted. Sarah was stripped of her badge. She stood still as stone on that porch, the papers fluttering slightly in the night breeze. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stepped back inside and closed the door. I tried to speak. She held up a hand. I need to think. Then she went into her office and shut the door. I sat on the couch, numb, and I realized something awful. This wasn't Deborah's final move. This was just checkmate. And the game board was far from empty. Somewhere out there, the real hand pulling strings hadn't even shown their face yet. The badge sat on the kitchen table like a scarlet letter. Not officially revoked, just shelved, placed inside a zippered pouch like something fragile and shameful. Sarah hadn't spoken in hours. She sat in her office with the lights off, blinds drawn, her laptop open, but untouched, her phone buzzing every 10 minutes like a slow, relentless reminder. And me, I stared at that badge like it had betrayed us. Not because she'd lost it, but because she hadn't fought to keep it. They took it, I said aloud, not meaning to. Just like that, from the dark hallway, her voice came back. Hello? No, I gave it to them. You didn't do anything wrong. That doesn't matter. In their eyes, perception is policy. She stepped into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. She was barefoot, her shoulders slumped in a way I hadn't seen since her father's funeral. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. They were locked on something far beyond the walls of our house. Something ahead. Calculated. You're planning something, I said. She didn't confirm, didn't deny. She just sipped her water and said, no one burns me twice. The next morning, the neighborhood felt off. Cars moved slower. People lingered at mailboxes, pretending to check for letters, but really watching our driveway. A jogger passed twice in 20 minutes, turning his head each time like he was filming with his sunglasses. The whisper campaign had begun. Someone had posted the audio online. The spliced quote, make the call. If Mitchell resists, take the shot. It was trending now, attached to an out-of-context photo of Sarah holding her badge. The worst parts of the internet had taken hold. Conspiracy accounts, HOA reform blogs, even one local political group spun it into a headline. Corrupt cop covers crimes in cozy called DSAC. Sarah didn't respond. Not online. Not publicly. She didn't even open her social media apps. She simply printed everything, every tweet, every thread, every lie. She filed them in a binder marked nice. I watched her disappear into process mode. But something inside her was changing. She stopped wearing her necklace, the silver star I gave her on our 3rd anniversary. She moved with mechanical precision. woke at 5 a.m. sharp, reviewed camera logs, read HOA bylaws, memorized city ordinances. Then came the mail, a large yellow envelope, this time addressed directly to me. Inside, a background check on Sarah. Everything, from her first internship with the sheriff's department to the college essay she wrote about her mother's overdose. Even a traffic violation she got at 19 for rolling through a stop sign. Someone had dug deep. Attached was a handwritten note. Still think she's a hero? I dropped it like it burned. Sarah took one look, then nodded. They're trying to divide us. I didn't ask who they were anymore. I knew Deborah, whoever she'd aligned with. Some group. Some personal connection. Maybe someone with a vendetta against the police, or a grudge from an old case. But the methods weren't HOA anymore. They were strategic. Targeted. Professional. Did you ever arrest someone from a cartel? I asked, not knowing why I needed to say it. Sarah raised one brow, like the question amused her. 3. Think this is related. Doubt it. This isn't revenge. It's disruption. They don't want me hurt. They want me neutralized. Later that night, while I was locking the garage, I heard it. A voice behind me. Nice house, Mike. I spun around. Empty street. I stepped onto the driveway. Lights flickered from the motion sensor, catching a shadow turning the corner behind the bushes near lot 46. I ran fast, but by the time I reached the side yard, whoever had been there was gone. Sarah reviewed the footage. The person was wearing a hoodie, mask, gloves. They moved like they'd done this before. They weren't breaking in. They were testing boundaries. Next day, our neighbor Ron, a retired contractor and Vietnam vet, came by with coffee and her printout. They're trying to remove her name from the HOA resident directory, he said quietly. Some committee members are claiming she falsified her application by hiding her job title. I blinked. That's not even. What does that mean? It means someone's rewriting rules to justify rewriting history. Sarah took the paper, scanned it once, then nodded. Let them, she said. What are you going to do? Ron asked. She looked up and finally smiled, cold and razor sharp. I'm going to flip the board. And that's when the planning began. She pulled out her laptop, accessed the public HOA registry, and began cross-referencing members. 5 of the 9 are up for re-election in 3 weeks. 3 of them have never even attended more than half the meetings. They vote by email, usually in line with Deborah. She tapped keys rapidly. Here's the loophole. Section 1 for B. Any resident in good standing can petition to challenge and call for a special election if they get 30% of homeowners' signatures. Ron let out a low whistle. You're not just kicking the hornet's nest, you're torching it. She looked at him. They came for my life, my name, my badge. I'm not torching it, I'm cleaning it. In 2 days, she printed flyers. Held an informal meeting in the community park. Only expected 10:30 to showed up. By the end of the night, they were angry, not at Sarah, at Deborah, and the system that had protected her. I was fined $800 for planting tulips. One woman said, my teenage son was written up for skateboarding in front of our own house. Said another, she told me our autistic daughter couldn't play music outside. Someone else muttered. Sarah didn't speak until they finished. Then, she stood up. My name is Sarah Johnson. Some of you know me as your neighbor. Some of you know me as the woman Deborah tried to destroy. And some of you know me as your chief of police. She paused. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for reform. I'm not running for board president because I want power. I'm doing it because this neighborhood doesn't belong to fear anymore. They clapped. Signed. One by one. At the end of the week, we had 62% of the neighborhood on our side, enough to trigger a special vote. But Deborah wasn't finished. Not yet. The night before the special meeting, our back fence caught fire. Deliberate. Accelerant. Used. It didn't spread far. We caught it in time. But the smoke damage was real. Fire department filed a report. Arson. The lead investigator said grimly. Sarah didn't say a word. She walked to the edge of the backyard, stared into the woods behind the house, then took a deep breath and said, "Let them come." Because now she was ready. The badge might have been off the table, but the gloves, those had just come off. The morning after the fire, the backyard smelled like melted plastic and soaked ash. Black streaks ran along the fence posts like angry brush strokes. The grass was scorched. Curled like brittle fingers, I stood there with the garden hose still in my hand, the nozzle dripping. The water long since turned off. Sarah didn't say a word. She just stood at the edge of the burn line, eyes scanning the tree line like a predator waiting for movement. "Do you think it was her?" I asked. She didn't turn. "Deborah doesn't have the nerve, but she has the friends," I said. Sarah's silence was confirmation. This wasn't a message anymore. This was a threat. "You should go to a hotel," I said. "Just for a few days." She turned finally. Her expression was unreadable. "I'm not running from my own lawn." And that was that. The fire marshal showed up a few hours later. He squatted near the scorched mulch and picked something out of the ash. Glass. Tiny, broken shards. "This was a bottle," he said. "Homemade Molotov. Someone wanted this to light fast and burn hot." Sarah stared at the object in his gloved hand. "Was there a wick?" "Gone," he said. "Burned clean." Then he glanced back at her. "You've made someone angry." She gave him a look that could freeze oceans. Then they'd better finish the job. He didn't argue. That night, we installed new cameras. Extra ones to behind the house, one on the roofline, another buried in the garden gnome. I used to joke about replacing. Sarah didn't sleep. She stayed up cataloging footage, matching timestamps, checking neighbors' security shares. At 2:23 a.m. She paused a clip and zoomed in. A figure in dark clothing running from the tree line. "Too short for Deborah," she murmured. Then pointed, "But tall enough to match Brandon Keyes, the treasurer, Deborah's shadow. He signs her fines." My stomach dropped. If she's still pulling strings, he's her puppet. Sarah leaned back in the chair. "We go public tomorrow." "Public? How?" She smiled faintly. "At the HOA vote." That next afternoon felt like a slow storm building. The park where the vote was being held was packed more than I'd ever seen. Families with lawn chairs, people holding clipboards, a couple of reporters, even to off-duty officers from Sarah's old precinct. Sarah walked in with a simple folder and a flash drive. No blazer, no badge. Just her. The HOA board looked shaken. Chairman Ted Walters opened the floor. "We're gathered to address the emergency petition submitted by the residents of Maple Street under Clause 1 for B." He droned on, clearly trying to control the energy. But then Sarah stepped forward. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice was clear, sharp. "I'd like to begin by playing a video." She handed the drive to a young volunteer who projected it on a makeshift screen. Footage rolled. It began with the original fire marshal's report footage of the smoldering fence, the arson conclusion, the glass shard. Then it cut. Security cam footage from our backyard, the dark figure. The TIMESTAMP. Then it cut again to HOA meeting notes, signatures, emails, Deborah's name, Brandon's initials. The connections were being drawn in real time. The crowd murmured, gasps rippled like wind. And then Sarah froze the screen on a blown-up image of the arsonist mid-run, still blurry, but distinct enough, and overlaid next to it, a photo of Brandon Keyes. Same height, same gait, same sneakers. Brandon stood up. "This is outrageous." Sarah didn't look at him. She turned to the crowd. "For 6 weeks, I've lived among you not just as a resident, but as a target, not for any crime, not for breaking laws, but because I stood up to someone who thought their HOA title made them untouchable." She stepped forward. "Deborah used this board to harass, fine, and manipulate. When she was removed, her loyalists continued her campaign. They do not represent this community." A woman shouted from the back, "Why didn't you arrest them?" Sarah replied calmly, "Because the justice system takes time. But the truth, that moves faster." She turned back to the board. "I move to vote Brandon Keyes off this board for breach of safety, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and abusive position." Ted stammered. That's not a formal motion. We'd need. A voice from the crowd interrupted. I second. It was Ron. Another voice. Third. A chorus followed. Ted raised his hands. Fine. All those in favor of removal. Dozens of hands shot up. Brandon paled. Ted counted in silence, then sighed. Motion pauses. Brandon grabbed his briefcase and stormed off. But not before shouting, "You haven't seen the last of us." Sarah smiled. That's true, because I'll see you in court. The moment he was gone, Sarah turned back to the people. But this isn't just about Brandon or Deborah. It's about the structure. The way rules have been used to suppress, not support. She pulled out another paper. I'm running for HOA president, not because I want control, but because this neighborhood deserves transparency, fairness, and safety. No more secret cameras, no more fake violations, and no more rulers pretending to be neighbors. They clapped. Not slowly. Not tentatively. They erupted. By the end of the meeting, 5 resignations had been submitted. Sarah had enough support to call for a special election the following week. But that night, she stood by the burned fence again, still watching, still waiting. You think it's over? I asked. She shook her head slowly. No, it's never over with people like them. Not until they're cornered. And even then, they bite. I looked at her. What do we do? She finally turned to me. We finish it, legally, publicly, permanently. She tapped the binder in her hands. This isn't war, it's reckoning. And just like that, the Sarah I always known, the calm, composed, measured professional became something else, a mirror. A storm made of everything they'd thrown at her, and she was about to throw it back piece by piece. The votes were cast before noon. By dusk, the results were in. Sarah had won, not by a slim margin. By a landslide. 87% of homeowners in Maple Street voted her into the HOA presidency, and opposed after every other candidate either withdrew or was rejected by majority petition. The previous board, once Deborah's army, now barely managed eye contact as Sarah walked past them into the community center's main hall. But this wasn't a celebration. This was an inquest. Sarah took no victory lap, no speeches, no champagne. Instead, she stood before a folding table, opened a thick folder, and read aloud. These are the names of every resident fined without due cause in the past 12 months. These are the payments collected without full disclosure. And these, she held up a separate stack, are copies of emails sent from HOA board members' private accounts, coordinating surveillance and intimidation tactics. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone whispered. That's illegal. Sarah didn't respond. She simply handed everything to the HOA's attorney, who sat at the edge of the room like he'd seen a ghost. I recommend you open an internal audit, she said, eyes flat. And if you don't, I'll file a public complaint to the county oversight board by morning. He didn't even argue, just nodded once. The room emptied fast. People didn't want to linger in the blast zone. Sarah didn't leave with the crowd. She waited. Alone. I found her there an hour later, still staring at the empty chairs, the silent projector, the small American flag at the corner of the stage. Are you waiting for something? I asked. She nodded once. Her, Deborah? She's not done. I sighed. She lost. The board's gone. Her allies are gone. The vote. She's not done. Sarah repeated. Her voice was firm. That's when my phone buzzed. And no number. Just one text. You think she's clean? Ask her about Omaha. I showed Sarah. She didn't even blink. Instead, she reached into her jacket, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to me. What's this? Insurance? I opened it. Inside, card documents, news clippings, and a personal letter, written in Sarah's handwriting. I prepared this 6 years ago, for the day someone tried to dig into Omaha. The top headline read, Officer risks career to expose internal corruption. Whistleblower awarded after cover-up revealed. Sarah tapped it. That officer was me. I stared at the article. You were the whistleblower. I was the only one willing to testify. The narcotics unit buried the evidence. I found it, reported it, got demoted, moved departments, nearly quit. But I stayed, and I rebuilt. I felt sick, and you never told anyone. No one wanted to hear it, she said quietly. Everyone just saw the scandal, not the sacrifice. It explained everything. The distance, the still behind her eyes, the silence after the Mitchell envelope. She'd already lived through the kind of destruction Deborah had only just begun to play at. And survived it. Why didn't you release this earlier? She looked me dead in the eye. Because Deborah wasn't the real enemy. The person behind this campaign isn't just petty. They're connected. She took out her phone and tapped open a folder labeled Trace. Then she played an audio clip, or phone call, distorted at first, then clearing. If she doesn't step down, we'll leak the wiretap to the Tribune. She's not scared of a fake audio. A man replied, we'll make her scared. Sarah paused the playback. That voice, I said, is that Gregory Hartwell? She finished. The developer, real estate magnate, longtime friend of Deborah's husband, runs 6 other communities, pushes boards into signing sweetheart contracts with his property management firm. And I just blocked his biggest HOA client from renewing their deal. You think this was retaliation? I know it is. And now? She was ready to answer. That night, Sarah uploaded a video. No flash, no drama, just her at her desk, reading from her Omaha documents, screen sharing her case files, showing timelines, audio clips, forensic evidence of doctored files, and metadata trails linking Brandon Keyes' phone to a Hartwell Holdings IP address. She didn't point fingers. She presented proof. No emotion. Just facts. And she ended the video with 6 words. Power isn't a weapon, it's responsibility. The video went viral in less than a day. And with it came a ripple Sarah hadn't expected. Support. Not just from neighbors. From old officers, retired judges, city workers who knew the system but had no voice. Someone from Internal Affairs emailed her anonymously. We believed the clip. Thank you for releasing the full context. But with the light came shadows. 2 nights later, a drone buzzed past our bedroom window. At first, I thought it was a toy, but it hovered too long. Watched it still. Sarah killed the lights, stepped outside, and watched it drift back behind the trees. She followed it, vanished into the dark for 5 minutes, came back holding the drone in both hands. No GPS tracker, she said, inspecting it. But this is commercial grade. Whoever sent it wanted eyes without a footprint. What now? She smiled. Now we bring in the real cavalry. The next day, Sarah made 1 call. Just one. A woman answered. Sharp voice, steady tone. I heard what they tried to do to you. I owe you more than a phone call. Sarah didn't explain who it was, but 12 hours later, 3 federal investigators arrived quietly on Maple Street, plain clothes. No fanfare, just clipboards, quiet conversations, and access to Sarah's evidence vault. And suddenly, the air changed. The neighborhood felt heavier. Because now it wasn't just Sarah versus Deborah. Now it was Sarah and the U.S. government versus every lie they ever tried to bury. They say storms don't start with thunder. They start with pressure, a tightening of air, a stillness before everything breaks. That week, Maple Street felt like a throat holding its breath. You could hear it in the way car doors shut softer, and how neighbors stepped off their porches when others walked by, in the fact that Deborah's blinds never moved. But her porch lights stayed on. Even at noon. No one said a word. But everyone knew something was coming. And Sarah, she was quiet, not tense, not afraid, just focused. She moved through the house like a chess player walking circles around a game already decided, waiting only for the final piece to fall. The federal investigators weren't loud. They didn't kick down doors. They knocked, smiled politely, and asked for a moment of your time. But they didn't come empty-handed. They had Sarah's footage, her call logs, her digital trail of forged audio clips and false HOA violations that now implicated 3 separate people, including Gregory Hartwell himself, and most damning, they had a sworn affidavit, signed by Brandon Keyes, He flipped. Told them everything. How Deborah had approached him after Sarah's first HOA violation. How Hartwell offered a bonus campaign grant if the board could discredit Sarah and push a favorable contract through without resident input. How they had hired a third-party digital contractor to doctor audio from a decade-old wire recording and leak it to local news. He even named the man who threw the Molotov, hired security thug with a fake name and a VIN registered in another state. The whole thing unraveled like a rotten thread. Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She watched it all unfold with that same sharp, steady look she'd worn the night she lost her badge. And when the agents asked if she wanted to press charges, she gave a single nod. I want accountability, not vengeance. Still, it came for them. Deborah was arrested first for conspiracy, falsified records, and obstruction. Her mugshot hit the morning news like lightning through dry grass. Neighbors stared, some in shock, others just quietly nodded. Then came Brandon's public confession. And finally, the real blow. Gregory Hartwell's from last for major HOA contracts in under 72 hours. By the time he lawyered up, the state's attorney general had already opened a formal investigation. But none of that brought Sarah back her badge. That decision came days later, on the steps of the precinct. She was standing there, waiting for a friend, when Captain Reiner walked out, flanked by 2 officers. He didn't say a word at first. Just handed her a sealed envelope. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a letter, signed by the review board. Her full reinstatement. No probation. No demotion. Just her title, her authority, her name clear. Sarah looked up at Reiner. You're sure? He smiled. We watched the whole video. You didn't just defend yourself. You reminded us what the badge is supposed to mean. She blinked fast. Only once. Then she shook his hand, turned, and walked back to the car. And for the first time in weeks, her shoulders relaxed. Not because the fight was over, but because she'd won it on her terms. With facts, with truth, with patience, that most people didn't realize was a weapon. That weekend, Maple Street held its first open community meeting under Sarah's leadership. No security. No hostility. Just chairs, lemonade, and a new tone. Ron, now treasurer, opened the meeting. He nodded to Sarah. And this time, she stood. No folder. No slideshow. Just her. I don't need to tell you what this neighborhood has been through. She began. You lived it. She looked around. Not just at the older couples and young families. At the veterans. At the single parents. At the quiet observers who'd once looked away from Deborah's abuses because they were afraid. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to listen. But I'll say one thing. The people in this circle are not enemies, not liabilities, not suspects. Your neighbors. You're the reason this place exists. And if we treat each other like threats instead of community, we've already lost. Silence. Then a clap. Then another. Until every single person stood up, cheering not just for her, but for themselves, for what they'd reclaimed, for what they'd become. Later that evening, I found Sarah in the backyard. She was sitting by the rebuilt fence, watching the stars. The air was cool. Still, you did it, I said softly. She didn't look at me, just smiled faintly. No, we did. I sat beside her. It's over. Then, she thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, but it's quieter now. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the necklace she hadn't worn in weeks, the silver star, and she put it back on. Her fingers lingered on it. I've learned something, she whispered. What's that? That strength isn't about noise or control. It's not about who talks loudest, finds the most, or makes people kneel. She looked at me finally. Real strength is quiet. It's standing up without striking, enduring without breaking. It's doing the right thing even when no one's clapping, even when they hate you for it. She paused. Especially then, I took her hand, and for the first time in months, I saw the Sarah I'd fallen in love with, not just back, but evolved. She didn't just reclaim her life, she transformed it, and Maple Street. It would never be the same. because now it wasn't just a place where people lived. It was a place where truth outlasted fear. And a quiet badge, once hidden in shadows, now glinted proudly in the sun.